Invincible Mumu by Han Jung-Wheolya. Chapter 131. Interest. Part 1. Deputy Dan Pilhu was heading to the academy gates to greet a guest. It was none other than Gyeong Jyeong, one of the four great warriors. He was surprised at the sudden visit, but he could guess why he had come. Did the headmaster ask Elder Gyeong for help? Dan Pilhu knew that the headmaster had a close relationship with the South Blade of the Emperor and the Poison Heir of the West. He knew Gyeong Jyeong's daughter-in-law was also the headmaster's maternal cousin. From that, he could infer that the old man had been asked to help with this situation. However, the timing of his appearance was a bit too much. To show up after the case is already resolved. This was a problem. It didn't really matter as long as the situation was resolved, but the problem was Mumu. Mumu was the one who had solved it by force. I wish they wouldn't have met. Dan Pilhu was worried about the potential of Mumu meeting with Gyeong Jyeong. If Gyeong Jyeong discovered that a 17-year-old boy was the one who had defeated one of the four great warriors, then he might want to fight as well. That was how any warrior would think. And then came the bad news. Urgent news. Elder Gyeong Jyeong and young Master Mumu have met near the training center of the dorms. Agent number 2 had reported this to him. Shit. He hurriedly changed direction and headed towards the training center near the dorms. It would be quite a mess if those two people met. Dan Pilhu headed there, hoping nothing would happen, but then ran into someone. Headmaster? Deputy? The two of them had coincidentally met along the way. Even without speaking, both of them understood the direction that they were heading in. They didn't bother asking any questions and continued to move. Does the deputy have the same thoughts as me? If it is about Mumu, then yes. Just as I thought. Isn't Elder Gyeong known to have a quick temperament? That is why I am rushing there. Papak. The two who shared their thoughts ran forward, but there was only one goal for them: to prevent Gyeong Jyeong and Mumu from fighting. The entire academy had been overturned with the defeat of one of the four great warriors. Sooner or later, the whole of the Central Plains would also know of it. And as if that wasn't enough, another fight was happening? This was a bigger problem than one would think. The balance might get broken. The four great warriors were said to be the best warriors of the current Murim. They were located in the north, south, east, and west to balance the land. It could be said that the forces of evil couldn't push any further because of this balance. The whole balance would be shaken if two of them were taken down. They couldn't be going at it right after meeting each other, right? Not yet, at least. Isn't he different from the East River Sword Star, who came here under different circumstances? Shinny Ui Jayam had a reason to fight with Mumu but not Gyeong Jyeong. Because of this, they wouldn't clash with each other. Kwang. The two people who didn't want their worst-case scenario to happen managed to see a wave of dust. The headmaster and the deputy had gone stiff at the sight of their worst fears coming true. Pat. The two of them scrambled even harder without time for another thought. The headmaster, feeling an ominous premonition, then said, "It couldn't be a situation where Elder Gyeong loses, right?" It is difficult to make a conclusion, but doesn't the headmaster know the elder well? In a sense, Gyeong Jyeong was the most dangerous of the four. He was a man who was equipped with poison and footwork. It was also his poison that had taken down that monster 17 years ago. That was why other people were reluctant to fight him. Poison. Elder Gyeong. It seemed that poison was a huge factor in his prowess. Even if his opponent was a monster beyond human comprehension, poison was a whole different thing. Even those with internal energy would have difficulty dealing with poison spreading within their bodies. Mumu was someone who had only begun to learn about it. The physical strength of Mumu transcends the level of humans. If he is poisoned, however, he will be vulnerable. Because there was no way that just physical strength could protect his body from poison. Therefore, the nature of Gyeong Jyeong and Mumu could be considered perfect opposites. In response, Dan Pilhu expressed his opinion. A fight that has started is impossible for us to intervene in. but because of the variable called poison, the fight might be calmed down quickly too. Poison. There is truth to your words. Poison is not something which can be easily dealt with. It was then that they realized that they had not heard a second roar. There was no way that a fight between two strong people would end with just one attack. I think the deputy is right. At the headmaster's words, the deputy nodded. The silence around them meant it was likely that the fight was already over and Mumu was suffering from poison, but... Pong! The sound of air being ripped apart reached and shook their heads. They stopped stiffly in their tracks at the sight of a hole in the clouds. What is this? What nonsense was this? What was this ominous feeling? A hole in the clouds. No. It was a sign that the result was contrary to what they expected. Arriving at where the fight had taken place only shocked them further. Deputy. You don't have to say it. I cannot believe this either. Gyeong Jyong was covered in blood, and his daughter-in-law and granddaughter protected him. This showed that Gyeong Jyong had lost. He lost? The deputy and headmaster couldn't believe what they were seeing. Not just one, but two of the four great warriors had been defeated in just 3 days. This meant that the result was the same even if the situation had changed. Defeating one would allow Mumu to stand tall, but defeating two would not bring good results. Mumu, this child has already surpassed the realm of the four great warriors? He was truly the supreme being of the current Murim. Gyeong Jyong was carried away by the infirmary staff after being treated using first aid. His daughter-in-law and granddaughter looked concerned for him, but the old man had yet to gain consciousness. Even if he did regain consciousness, the situation would shock him. The infirmary staff had said, the left shin bone was crushed beyond repair. Is there no way to recover it? I am sorry, I will do my best for now, but I feel like the revival of his leg is quite an unrealistic result. Does that mean his left leg is crippled? Looks like that for now. They had expected this, but hearing it felt different. His left leg would be impossible to recover. They were informed that regaining the ability to walk on his own would be lucky. It meant that Gyeong Jyong would no longer be able to use his martial arts to their full potential. It is all my fault. Gyeong Seorin blamed herself. Although his life was saved, her grandfather had lost a leg. It broke her heart that all of this happened due to her own provocative actions. Mom. Enough. Her mother stopped her from blaming herself. But there is always a winner and a loser. Father, no, our grandfather is a lot stronger than other people, so defeats were rare, and he would rarely get injured. However, do you think he didn't expect this kind of situation while walking down the path of the warrior? No, he is a warrior and was always prepared for this. And your grandfather is strong. He isn't the kind of person to be discouraged by something like this. So don't worry for too long. The more you worry, the more insulting it is to him. Jin Hyang was also heartbroken by this. However, it had already happened. Being within Murim for decades, she knew that her father-in-law had killed thousands and that karma would eventually come for him. There is something more important than that. More important? Jin Hyang looked at Mumu, who was with his friends, and said, didn't you say you would go for it even if you failed 10 times? You said you would make that boy into a man. Gyeong Seorin went silent. Mumu had turned her grandfather into a cripple. She could no longer speak of what happened with her own mouth. I am sorry. I was acting. Does that kid Mumu have a woman he likes? No. I don't think so. Why was she asking this? Seorin then realized. Then it is good. Make sure to knock him down. What? You get what I mean, right? Mom. What are you even saying? Make him into your man. Seorin felt confused upon hearing those words. She thought everyone would object to Mumu, considering he had crippled her grandfather. So these words from her mother were the most unexpected. But Mom. If I were you, I would never let the child go. Let him go? Do you think anyone else could turn the 4 great warriors into this? True, but two had fallen at Mumu's hands. They hadn't just lost a fight but were utterly crushed. Jin Hyang then spoke in a serious voice, I guarantee that the entirety of Murim will revolve around that child in the future. Around Mumu? 2 of the 4 were lost today. Do you know what it means? Ah. Siren's eyes trembled at this. She realized what her mother was hinting at. At this point, Mumu could be said to be the closest person to that inhuman monster from 17 years ago. Today might be a sad event for the Guyong family, but it will be different if you can get your hands on that child. At those words, Siren's eyes shone. Her mother was right. She should not be broken down over her grandfather's injury. She had to make Mumu hers, and she would have nothing to fear. Siren spoke with a voice filled with determination, I will take hundreds of shots at him to make him mine. Right. That is how my daughter should be. Jin Hyang gave her full support. Once this incident spread, fights would inevitably crop up for Mumu. In that inevitable struggle, she would need to get a head start. It shouldn't be for this, but Mumu should be brought into my family. It wasn't something she would leave solely to her daughter. Guyong Jiang was put in the infirmary. When he woke up, he had a blank expression. The aftermath of his defeat had yet to fully sink in yet. We will move you to a bed. The guards carefully moved Guyong Jiang to a bed. He then turned his head and spotted someone familiar. He looked at the person leaning on the bed opposite of him. It was Shin Eui Jiam, who had ended up here after being defeated by Mumu. The two looked at each other. Both had mixed emotions in their eyes. Chapter 132. Interest. Part 2. The staff had left the infirmary after the treatment was complete. The 2 great warriors inside didn't speak for a while as their minds were filled with complicated thoughts. They were also in a difficult situation as they felt their honor was dead. As both of them were here, it meant that they had lost. The first one to speak was Shin Eui Jiam. My fear turned into reality. Hearing his words, Guyong Jiang frowned. Even if no one said it, it was already difficult to comprehend their defeat to a 17-year-old boy. Did you expect this to happen? I am not saying this to make you feel uncomfortable. Then what do you mean? At this question, Shin Eui Jiam sighed. This man had too many quirks. This probably wouldn't have happened if he had met with the headmaster first or had come to the infirmary to meet him. Instead, he went directly to Mumu. But it was too late now. I also fought with him. Ahem. I did hear about that. Guyong Jiang clicked his tongue while looking at Shin Eui Jiam. He knew he had been hurt, but he saw Shin Eui Jiam with his forehead in bandages while both his arms were supported by splints and bandages. He was not himself. What is this? Guyong Jian was also in shock when he realized it. The defeat was certain, but he also realized that he had lost the sensation in his left leg. It then dawned on him. I lost one of my legs. He was a person famed for his footwork. However, having one leg crippled meant that it was no longer possible to do the same things. At first, this filled him with frustration and anger. All of that disappeared as he looked at Shin Eui Jiam. The new water pushes out the old water in the river. 17 years ago, they had become the 4 great warriors of Murim and were revered as the best warriors in the world. They had spent 17 years like this. Guyong Jiang had also thought there would come a day when he would be pushed off his pedestal as nothing was permanent in this world. But the moment had come so quickly that it shocked him. The child was already stronger than the man they had fought 17 years ago. This was an overwhelming defeat. He isn't human. He recalled his fight with Mumu and how it did not feel like he was fighting a warrior. It was similar to the feeling of dealing with that man 17 years ago. However, Mumu was slightly different. It is like a predator. Yes, a beast. Perhaps because of this, he felt more relief about surviving rather than anger from losing. Guyong Jiang looked at Shin Eui Jiam. How many seconds did you last? At this question, Shin Eui frowned. Phew. Did that really matter now? Even so, they wanted to make something clear since they were two of the great warriors. Why does that matter now? It has been a long time since we fought, so I am curious about it. At his words, Shin Eui shook his head. In the end, all he wanted to do was find out how much he had improved through Mumu. Or perhaps he wanted to figure out if he was superior. Shin Eui, who didn't want to answer, said, I do not remember, but it feels like we fought for around 50 seconds. Of course, if Mumu had shown his full strength from the start, he wouldn't be able to last. Those details didn't need to be said to this old man. But hearing those words, Jiang looked shocked. No. You lasted 50 seconds against that monster? He couldn't believe it. Didn't he end up like this after only a few seconds? If Shin Eui had lasted for around 50 seconds, then it meant that he had improved from before. Was I being lazy all this time? Jiang felt his lips go dry. He needed to have held on for 50 seconds to be on the same level. He had failed to do so and now felt ashamed. Shin Eui then casually asked, How long did you last? The old man's shock was so deep that he couldn't answer. Seeing this reaction, Shin Eui smiled. Of course, it was because he assumed the old man didn't even last more than a couple seconds. When Jiang noticed the smile, he frowned. That guy is laughing at me. Even if no words were said, the expression on his face made it clear. Jiang then said, It doesn't matter how long we fought. What is that supposed to mean? The result makes me similar to a wolf as I managed to make that child spit out blood due to my poison. Exclamation point. Shin Eui looked shocked at that. Shin Eui could not recall seeing Mumu even bleed during their fight. He couldn't even see a drop of blood despite using a sword. Jiang then asked. This old man heard you fought 2 days ago, but I couldn't see any wounds when I fought. This time Shin Eui clicked his tongue. Was the tale of Jiang causing Mumu some damage even true? He didn't think the old man would say anything false, but he also felt competitive. Yes. Well, it is good. As expected of Elder Guion. Both had been hurt and were now listening to each other. Comparing how long they lasted should be the last thing they were doing. Mumu could annihilate anyone in the first place, so making comparisons was useless. Jiang coughed as he realized that. He felt lost. It was amusing that they were talking about how long they had endured. Shin Eui then looked at him. Is it alright to talk about it? It seemed like Jiang didn't know whose child Mumu was. Perhaps Mumu didn't say anything because of the promise. After thinking about it for a moment, he decided to not do it. No. If he told the story now, this old man would only mess up the situation and might cause the child to bring about an even bigger disaster. It would be better for him to not know. He can find out about it once the time is right. He felt a bit sorry for not revealing it, but he had to do it for the sake of peace. At that moment, Jiang's serious face transformed into a smile, scaring Shin Eui. What is it? It is funny. What do you mean? I thought that monsters like that man would never appear again. His son is that monster. It was frustrating not being able to talk about it, but it couldn't be helped. Jiang, who didn't know his thoughts, then said, Actually, I didn't tell you before, but I am now confident that I could fight against that monster from 17 years ago and not lose. This is why I thought that our time as the best would last longer. Shin Eui couldn't deny it. He, too, had been confident that he would win a battle against that man now. Who would have thought that someone even stronger would have appeared? However, we clearly don't know enough about the world. Just how did such a monster appear? Shin Eui sighed at hearing the complaint. He could understand that feeling. Elder. How could things in this world work out the way we want them to? Exciting things fade, and new things inevitably appear. Once a new era comes, isn't it the fate of the strong to accept it? Hearing his words, Gyeong smiled and nodded as if accepting it. You are right. Of course. Although this happened sooner than expected, what can we do? This is how time flows. True. But we need to prepare for the era of the next 4 great warriors. Shinny Uijayam was confused. What did this old man mean? Gyeong continued to speak while fiddling with his beard. My words mean my granddaughter will move up in this world. Elder, what do you mean? I've said in the past that I wouldn't accept a boy who wasn't at least as strong as me as her partner. However, this world is full of things we don't know. Shinny Uijayam was shocked at this. What was this old man saying? Gyeong smiled. I feel so relieved now. That child Mumu lacks nothing and can become my grandson-in-law. Gyeong was already speaking of marriage. Shinny Uijayam was shocked at this absurdity. He suddenly felt the urge to tell the truth. Old man. We killed that child's father. Yet this old man wanted to make the boy part of his family? How could he even think of that? This felt like a sick dream. Hoo. You would understand this old man's feelings if you had a daughter or granddaughter. Wouldn't you also like it? Imagine having such a monster join my family. Judging by Gyeong's expression and how he spoke, he was already sure of this. Shinny Uijayam's head began to hurt. Meanwhile, the academy was in an uproar again. News began to spread that Gyeong had been defeated by Mumu on the academy grounds. As a result, rumors circulated between the teachers and the students. New information. Not just 1, but 2 of the 4 great warriors had been defeated. That was simply saying that he was superior to the others. Since the information was being controlled within the academy, the information had yet to leak outside, but word would inevitably travel. I don't know, man. Shouldn't he be called the best or something? Right, he did defeat 2 of the strongest. How could such a thing happen? I know. How did such a monster appear in the same age group as us? He is just different. They were certain and envious of Mumu's exceptional difference. However, when that difference in levels completely pierced the ceiling and moved to heaven, that feeling would solidify as envy. That was the feeling of the academy students and teachers. When Shinny Uijayam was defeated, the focus was on what Mumu did to train. However, it now changed as the 17-year-old boy possessed unimaginable power. Unlike the 4 great warriors, who had all received their titles at a relatively older age, Mumu was still young. It was hard to imagine how strong he would become in the future. But I heard Mumu is actually an adopted son of Eugene Sung's father? They aren't real siblings? Yes. Besides, he is still too young and has no partner. Everyone was focused on Mumu's future. Not only did he possess immense strength, but his affiliation and family were also good. Where else could someone find a human of such quality? Not everyone publicly revealed their thoughts, but they all began to move secretly. Thud. In annoyance, Moilwa stuck her chopsticks in the middle of her rice bowl. She had spent the past 2 days facing students who wanted to enter muscle training. What is with these people? Within a few hours, the sight had changed. Numerous female students were gathered around the table where she, Mumu, and Jin Hyuk were seated. They were visibly flirting with Mumu. They were giving Mumu side dishes for him to eat. Mumu didn't think much of it, as the women would giggle and smile at every sound he made. These girls are here with a plan. Women know women better. And Moilwa could clearly see their intentions of wanting to win Mumu's favor. Yes, she could even understand it. Mumu is now the hottest topic in the school. 2 of the 4 great warriors were defeated by Mumu. As a result, his reputation had increased in the academy. It was only natural for these women to show interest. Clench. What was even more annoying to her was that there were people showing interest in Jin Hyuk as well. With so many around him, it felt like he was their next target. Jin Hyuk. Have this too. And no, I am fine. It is fine. This is the time for men to eat and grow. You don't have Yup. Oh my. You eat so well? Jin Hyuk wasn't sure about what to do with these women around him. Moilwa wanted to smack him on the head as she noticed his lips twitch at the attention. But what could be done with this man? Like it? Is it that good? Just like Moilwa, who was staring at the women around them with angry eyes, another person had identical eyes. Tang Soso fiddled with the vial of poison in her hand. Should I poison all of them? Chapter 133. Interest. Part 3. A faint melody filled the air in a forest near the West Wind Pavilion. A 19-year-old girl was enjoying the melody with her eyes closed. She was none other than Ma Yunhua, the third-ranked student. The song she was humming was a mellow and sweet melody. She often listened to this song when she found herself having a hard time. She would forget her anger or sadness each time she did and revive her will to fight. Clench. She clenched her short swords in her hands. The song then stopped in the middle. Ma Yunhua opened her eyes. It didn't end yet. She sighed when no reply was forthcoming. The fact that the song had stopped in the middle meant something needed to be said. So she opened her eyes. If there is something to say it. Mississippi. Say it. Did you hear what happened today? Ma Yunhua gave the man a strange look. She knew what he was talking about. The entire Heavenly Martial Arts Academy was turned upside down today. It was due to the news of the poison heir of the West, one of the four great warriors, and his defeat. I know. The one who defeated him was Mumu, the boy she had been interested in for a long time. The fact that two of the four warriors fell to this child is also already spreading. She, too, had been shocked when she heard this news. Mumu was just 17 years old. Many in Murim were known as geniuses, but none were like this at such a young age. But now, with two of the four defeated by his hands, Mumu was already revered by his fellow academy students. Once the news spread to broader society, it would be difficult to deny its factuality. I knew it would be like this. She had seen how skilled Mumu was during the arson incident and thought of him as unusual. She knew that if he displayed his strength, even she wouldn't be an opponent for him. But it was much clearer now. Mumu might be a monster that even this academy could not deal with. And the man continued. Things have become complicated. What? The forces of justice seem to have decided to accept this new change. They are even taking it a step further. Ma Yunhua couldn't say anything to that. The forces of evil had sent her into hiding nearly 20 years ago. Even their leader, who had seemed untouchable, had been defeated by people with an advantage in numbers. The sect had thought that they might persist for a long time. However, even their monster-like leader fell to people called the Four Great Warriors, ushering in a new era. The current Four Great Warriors had grown into monsters that are second to none, but even they ended up falling. This was a frightening change. If this continued to be the case, it was questionable if her sect would ever rise back up again. The power of the forces of justice seemed too strong now. And the man continued. The forces of justice will now revolve around Mumu. I know. And that would make rebuilding the sect even more difficult. This made her sigh. After a moment's hesitation, the man said to her, but maybe now is your chance. Chance? Ma Yunhua frowned. What was this man saying? He then continued. We found out that the child, Mumu, was adopted by Royal Inspector Eugene Sung's family. Royal Inspector? She remembered hearing about this. This was probably the other brother that was spoken about, but what chance could there be? Miss, do you not like that child? Ma Yunhua's face became red at this unexpected question. Why was he bringing this up? That. You do not have to hide it. Every time she spoke of Mumu, the man noticed her face would turn red. It was the reaction of a woman who clearly liked a person. The man had been uncomfortable seeing her like that. He had sworn allegiance to her and liked her as a leader, but he never wanted to show discomfort to her desires. In the long run, these two people were destined to be on paths that would never intersect. But I need to control my emotions. That was how the sect could be rebuilt even quicker. He then said, "Take that child." What is that supposed to mean? Word has it that his older brother graduated from the academy but became an official of the imperial palace. Judging from that, their family might not have much understanding of Murim. So what? If my lady has that child by your side, the reconstruction of our sect could be quickened. Ma Yunhua's eyes trembled at this. She knew what he was trying to say. Mumu was poised to become the top person in Murim. If she could make Mumu hers, then rebuilding the sect would be simple and would also weaken the forces of justice by over 30%. For that reason. Do you not like it? Then bring him in. If he settles down here and becomes loyal to you, rebuilding our sect will be easy. At his words, she bit her lip. She didn't want her pure affection to be corrupted in this way. Sadly, however, the man was right. He would become her worst enemy if he decided to be loyal to the forces of justice. Clench. Ma Yunhua gripped her sword sheath. Fine. I need to have him. After a slight hesitation, she decided to do it. Whatever the reason, it was better to make him hers rather than regret it when he gets snatched away by other people. However, she had another problem. How do I make him mine? She had no experience in seducing or dating a man. Interest in Mumu didn't grow only in the academy. As the gag order from the academy was lifted, news began to spread outside. It inevitably reached the home of Yu Yipkyung. Yu Yipkyung and his wife felt sad when they sent their two children to the academy. They tried to forget the loneliness of not having their children around constantly and spent time together. However, there was a lot of noise outside today since early in the morning. This woke them both up from their sleep. "Madam." At front of the gate. Hearing the words of the servant who had rushed in, the madam of the household couldn't hide her concern. "Honey?" They had already suffered a long separation due to the exile. His exile had also been for something that he hadn't done. She was always prepared for the same thing to happen. At this, however, Yu Yipkyung shook his head. "It cannot be. I have been pardoned. What is happening?" He tried to calm her down, but he was feeling worried. He had to find out what was happening. Even if he had been pardoned, Yu Jinsung was now in the palace, so he thought anything could happen. "I will go." "Let's go together." "Stay here." "We don't know." "Let's go together." "Fine." The two of them got dressed. As they went out, they could see the servants gathering and shouting. What was this? They cautiously moved to the gate with trembling eyes. But both of their eyes went wide open. Their residence was quite far from the village, yet many people were there. They were carrying carts filled with rice, assorted sacks, firewood, silk, and other expensive goods. "Honey, what is this?" "My wife." "I don't know." They had no idea. They couldn't understand why so many carts were in front of their home. People saw them appear and began to rush in. "You are Scholar Yu? You are Yu Yipkyung?" All of them were looking for a single person, puzzling his wife. "What did you do?" Yu Yipkyung waved his hand. "I haven't left the house since I came back from exile, so what could I have done?" He honestly didn't know. But the question was immediately resolved. "I am a foreign dignitary from Nanyang, Jiang'an Wu. Our lord requests young Master Mumu's hand in marriage for his eldest daughter." Yu Yipkyung tilted his head. This man had suddenly appeared and asked for Mumu's hand in marriage? But it wasn't just him. We were here first. How dare you speak before us? Scholar Yu, our lord is requesting young Master Mumu's hand for his second daughter. The gifts on the carts are all for him. Our lord is a merchant. Wait. Our family arrived earlier than you. The cart there is a gift from our sect leader. It isn't a huge deal, but please accept it. And our sect leader asked for young Master Mumu. Stop. It will be our family first. How dare you butt in? The atmosphere was becoming rowdy, which shocked Yip Kyung. What the hell is this? Did this mean that all these people in carts were here for Mumu? What the hell was that idiot doing in the academy? He immediately wanted to go look for Mumu. Even his wife was shocked. When Eugene Sung graduated, she saw something similar but not to this extreme extent. The end of the procession wasn't even visible. Honey, do you know anything about this? Yu Yip Kung could not reply as he, also, was having a hard time figuring things out. Around the middle of the evening, at the special training center located in the northeast, Mumu performed squats repeatedly while lifting weights attached to a rod. Phew. This was special training to adapt his body to the weight of the new bands at level 10. As he reached level 10, he doubled the weight. After a few days, the weight was becoming something he was getting used to. In order to get even more freedom, Mumu was training his strength by adding more weight to the iron bar. Swish. But something strange happened then. A haze was rising from the body of Mumu as he performed his squats. This was different from before, and there had to be a reason. Abyssal name. Mumu, whose thoughts were only on training, thought that it was a waste of time to memorize a verse. It was the verse he had read on the ceiling of the library's third basement. Then there was the verse the sage had given him. He was a little aware of martial arts and thought that these two verses seemed linked. Mumu had memorized it in succession. This then made his body warm as energy rose within it. However, the speed of this energy changed when the two verses were being spoken. Swish. The heavenly martial true classic. It was something related to martial arts left behind by the sage. Mumu was reciting it as it was meant to enhance control over the body, but its actual effects were different. This stimulated all forms of growth simultaneously. The energy not only rose from below Mumu's navel but also in the middle near his heart and the upper front of his brain. Nice. Doing this, I will be less tired than usual. Mumu wasn't taking this kind of change for granted. He was satisfied with not getting tired while training. However, if other warriors learned about this, they would go crazy. Normal warriors would only be able to use the middle part of their body. Their brain connection would only open up when their body had reached its limit. However, Mumu was now doing it while chanting at the same time. Heavenly Martial True Classic. This was something that even the sage who handed the second verse to Mumu didn't foresee. As Mumu worked hard on his training, someone wandered through the darkness and was approaching the training center. The person moving cautiously in the darkness was none other than Tang Soso. Before the others go for him, I need to make him mine. She had been interested in Mumu since the first time she met him, but she was seeing too many women around him. She thought he would like her over time, but that didn't seem possible now. She also couldn't use poison in the academy. If this is enough, Mumu will fall for me, right? She wore her prettiest clothes and even wore makeup. She thought that he would become interested now, even if he said he wouldn't in the past. SHHH. As she secretly approached the training center, she noticed another shadow following and stopped. Gyeong Sierin? It was Gyeong Sierin. Unlike her, she was entering the training center openly and proudly. She was also determined to do something while wearing a dress thin enough that it looked like skin on her body. That fox. Tang Soso became angry. What the hell was she doing here in the middle of the night with such a dress? But Gyeong Sierin, who was heading in confidently, also stopped. It was because someone else had appeared. It was none other than Ma Yanhua. While she wasn't as bold as Gyeong Sierin, she appeared wearing bright clothes that were unlike her usual self. It would surely attract the attention of many men. In particular, the chest part stood out. Tang Soso, who looked at Gyeong Sierin and Ma Yanhua, soon was holding her head with both hands. Damn things. Chapter 134. Interest. Part 4. It was quite an unexpected thing. Gayong Siren had chosen tonight because her interest in Mumu had only continued to grow. Even today, countless students began showing interest in Mumu and outright flirting with him. She knew this was just the start. A 17-year-old man who was close to being the best warrior in Murim. Few people would let the chance of making this man their own go. This was just the start of this war. Accordingly, she decided that to prevent that from happening, she would make Mumu hers before the night passed. A close-range attack. This was her plan. From what she had noticed, Mumu was naive, and she had also learned that until he arrived in the academy, he had been in exile alone with just his adopted father. Therefore Mumu had somewhat poor social skills and knew nothing about women. Perhaps that was why even when he was at an age where his desires would be out of control, he only desired to continue growing his muscles. Then I need to wake up his passion. No matter how lacking in desire a man was, their intense need to reproduce would cause their body to react differently when confronted with one of the opposite sex. She planned to awaken that kind of desire in Mumu. Perfect. To be honest, she was confident in this plan. She was intelligent, charming, and had a narrow waist alongside voluptuous breasts. She was proud enough to call herself one of the best beauties. And tonight, she was determined to ensure Mumu would fall for her. Gayong Siren frowned. This was unexpected. Was there someone else with the same plan as her? Senior Ma. Gayong Siren. The woman she met was Ma Yunhua. She was beautifully dressed, completely different from her usual dark form. Ma Yunhua looked to be on alert. What is this? Ma Yunhua was quite shocked when she noticed Gayong Siren. Normally, she would not wear clothing that would bring out her body's charms as a woman. However, she decided to do it for Mumu. She wanted to look good for just one man. However, she ran into someone else before she could do that. She naturally scanned Gayong Siren's clothing and knew. She is aiming for the same thing. Gayong Siren had a similar purpose to her, and that complicated things. She never imagined that she would have to compete with another person to seduce a man. The two continued staring at each other before Gayong Siren eventually opened her mouth. Senior, you look breathtaking. Are you going to meet someone? Those words made Ma Yunhua's cheeks go red. It was because she was conscious of the mention of a man. She was determined to seduce Mumu, but she was doing this to rebuild her sect. She had never liked anyone until now. She is aiming for Mumu. Contrary to her looks, Senior Ma is quite fox-like. Ma Yunhua's reactions made Siren certain of this and sent her on high alert. I need to block her off. Ma Yunhua was more troublesome compared to other women. Like herself, she was an attractive woman with good features. She was a dangerous person to compete against in this and was a target that had to be kept in check more compared to other female students in the academy. Gayong Siren smiled and said, I hoped we wouldn't meet. I was on my way to meet a man. A man? It is quite embarrassing, but I am meeting a man younger than me. Younger? At her words, Ma Yunhua's eyebrows shot up. No matter how much she heard, the only thing she could comprehend was that Gayong Siren was here to meet with a much younger man. No. From what Ma Yunhua knew, Mumu didn't have any women he liked and was dating no one. She knew that his only obsession was strength training, and Ma Yunhua was on guard. Is this kid doing something to keep me in check? Her feelings as a woman were speaking out. This meant that Gayong Siren was trying to edge her out. Ma Yunhua had always watched her from the sidelines in the dorms since she was the granddaughter of Elder Gayong. She had no intention of falling for such an obvious tactic. Ma Yunhua opened her mouth. Oh my, for real? How can you be this crafty? Crafty? Like Siren, I am also aiming for a younger man. Huh. At Ma Yunhua's words, Gayong Siren snorted in disbelief. She had tried to edge her off with light words, but this woman was coming at her head-on. If that was the case, talking was pointless and a waste of time. That's strange. Something tells me that the young man the senior and I are talking about might overlap. This is what I was hoping to say. Why does it feel like the junior we are talking about is the same person? As soon as their words ended, both women began to release their chi. Before being women, they were warriors. If an emotional conflict was made between them, there was only one way to resolve it. With their martial arts. Chuck. The fan that Gyeong Seorin held was unfolded. Similarly, Ma Yunhua also clutched the sword that was at her waist. Gyeong Seorin then spoke. As a junior, this might be rude, but I will warn you. Mumu is someone I've wanted for a long time. Clench. Those direct words only made Ma Yunhua clench her sword more tightly. Was this girl warning her to step back? Such arrogance to act like this just because of her grandfather. My junior has an unusual taste to go after a man who brutally defeated your grandfather. These words made Gyeong Seorin's eyes change. She didn't express it, but she was extremely displeased at her grandfather's defeat. Her grandfather was the subject of all kinds of rumors in the academy. As she had nothing to retort with, it only increased her anger. It feels like the senior and I will need to get a conclusion here. Quite interesting. I was thinking the same thing. The atmosphere between the two women slowly became suffocating. It would not be unusual for the fight to start at any moment. But both women, who held their weapons, turned their gazes to something simultaneously. Weak. Their gaze landed on the top of a tree near the training center where Mumu was. Gyeong Seorin then swung her fan in that direction. The assassin's needles flew quickly from her fan and rushed towards the tree. Clang! The things that countered it was none other than the needles of the Tang family. Someone then landed on the ground from the tree. SOSO? Gyeong Seorin was shocked. The person who dropped to the ground was none other than Tang SOSO of the Sichuan Tang family. She thought they were a third person aiming to eliminate the two of them. She hadn't expected it to be her. Ma Yunhua looked like she was similarly shocked. Tang SOSO? Ma Yunhua frowned at Tang Soso's dressed-up appearance. It was clear what she was also aiming for. TCH. Tang SOSO, who got caught, clicked her tongue. She was trying to take advantage of the situation where the two women were keeping each other in check. She secretly tried to move to Mumu, hoping they wouldn't notice. Well, this was only to be expected from two of the top 5 women of the academy. Now that this happened. Pat. Tang SOSO used her footwork. Whoever reaches the target wins. She decided that it would be better to move towards Mumu than try to fight against the two of them. You. No. Gyeong Seorin and Ma Yunhua, who noticed this, spread out immediately. Tang SOSO didn't like to lose. Damned bitches. And so, the conflict between the 3 women began. Of course, Gyeong Seorin was the fastest, but Tang SOSO was only slightly behind. Papa Pat. I am first. Tang SOSO glanced back to check and noticed the training center was already so close. Just a little more, and Gyeong Seorin could not possibly catch. Pack. Ah. A mistake. As she looked back, someone appeared in her path, and she bounced back. But. I bounced back? Tang SOSO felt shocked and frowned at who could possibly do that. She looked up to see a strange man who was tilting his head. His right eye gazed to the right while the left was on Tang SOSO. What? The movement of his eyes was so bizarre that it was terrifying. She was running at top speed, but she ended up being pushed back. Gyeong Seorin and Ma Yunhua also stopped in shock. Despite not wanting to lose their advantage, the situation was so bizarre that they had no choice but to stop. Who are you? Gyeong Seorin asked the man and roll. The man's eyes turned around and turned to Gyeong Seorin. The eyes that moved in different directions made them frown. The man then said, Need to find, find. He ignored their question and tried to move somewhere, heading towards the training center where Mumu was. Gyeong Seorin only felt her doubts increase as she saw the strange man walking away and went to block his path. Who are you? Where are you going? But before she could finish her question, the man passed by her. Gyeong Siren tried to grab him by the shoulder, but Pack. The man grabbed her hand before she could even touch him. Weak. He then threw her against the wall of the training center. The force was very strong since Gyeong Siren had failed to shake off the man's hand. Despite being thrown, however, she soon returned to kick the man. Pack. Gyeong Siren's kick cleanly landed on the man's neck. But the man who was kicked didn't react. How could this man endure her kick when he didn't even use a defensive technique or move? She was flustered as he grabbed her by the ankle. Let go of her. Papak. At the same moment, Tang Soso kicked the man on his right rib. She wanted to make sure that he didn't fully catch Gyeong Siren. Instead of being pushed, the man simply let himself be kicked. He didn't let Gyeong Siren go but slammed her into the ground instead. Kwang. Ak. Gyeong Siren was thrown to the ground and groaned in pain. Seeing this, Ma Yunhua realized the severity of the issue and used her sword to cut at the hand that was holding Gyeong Siren's ankle. Chuck. The wrist was cut by a sword that moved as gracefully as a butterfly's wing. Her blade cleanly cut through the muscles in that hand. Take this too. Without missing the chance, Tang Soso also used her assassin needles on him. Pupupuak. All of it was thrown accurately at blood points that would halt his movement. With his wrist cut and blood points suppressed, the man finally let go of the ankle and flinched. What is he? Gyeong Siren, who clearly looked like she was in pain, was red and flushed. Tang Soso shook her head. I don't know. Why are such people even in the academy? This was a face that they were seeing for the first time. If it was a face that looked to be in its 30s, then it had to be a teacher, staff, or a guard. However, she couldn't recognize any that looked like this one. Besides, his eyeballs were moving separately. There was no way such a strange person wasn't being talked about. As they paused for a moment in puzzlement. Something feels wrong. The veins in the man's face bulged out. It was a gruesome sight. PSSSSS. At that moment, the needles stuck in the man's blood points were released. He then punched Tang Soso, who was the closest. And Ak. The strength behind it was so much that Tang Soso was pushed back. Thud. She had to roll on the ground before getting up with a questioning face. She could barely feel any internal energy when she took the blow. This felt similar to Mumu? His strange strength was similar to Mumu's. She now really wondered who this person was. SRNG. Ma Yunhua followed her and pulled out her white blade as she went for the strange man. She quickly unleashed both of her swords and crossed them to utilize a sword technique that created petals that would sweep the man's body away. Cha-cha-chang. Wounds made by the swords appeared clearly on the man's body. It looked like blood would start to flow, but something else happened. SSSS. The veins in his body wriggled visibly, and the sword cuts soon began to mend together as if they had never happened. At this sight, Ma Yunhua and Gyeong Siren went stiff. The wound is recovering in an instant. It was unbelievable. The cuts were healing in an instant. This was too bizarre for them to understand. As everyone stood in shock, the man's eyes continued to spin. And he then mumbled. CLU, dead. He spoke in a scary voice and moved toward Ma Yunhua. Ma Yunhua, surprised by the sudden movement, swung her black dragon sword to defend against the attack. However, the man simply came at her with a clenched fist. Chong. What strength is this? At the moment of impact, her swords bounced back. The man's strength was too much for her to handle. The sword that had bounced away created an opening in her chest area. He then went for it. No. Ma Yunhua hastily stabbed the man's shoulder. Whack. Yet even when her sword penetrated his shoulder, the man didn't seem to feel any pain and continued his attack. No. Ma Yanhua, who noticed this, clenched her teeth and raised her internal energy to defend herself. At that moment, Pack! Before his fist could reach her, the man's body swelled up further. Swash! As his body swelled up, behind him stood a large man that emitted a gray glow with steam rising from his body. The man holding the head of this unknown attacker. It was Mumu. Mumu? Swish! The man whose head was caught began to struggle. Mumu asked, "What is this?"